Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm your host, William Stout, here with Georges P. and Leon Krowski. How are you guys doing?
I'm chilling. I'm
Doing
chilling.
okay.
Other than the flu bug that decided to get me at the very last moment when I thought I was in the clear, I am doing wonderful. So, what do we have tonight? Well, we know what we have tonight. It's been the topic for a few weeks now, and we've been busy the last few weeks, so we can finally get to it. What the hell is Trump doing with the tariffs?
JD Pondon is here to stay. I think the leftists are unironically right at this point that he's just doing JD Pond somehow.
What's JD Pond? I don't
The
know.
joint dictatorship of the proletariat of oppressed nations. He's killing the first world's consumer kind of standpoint. It's a really dumb theory of, what if all the third world got together to bully the first world to liberate the proletariat or something? But a lot of the people on the left, at least from what I've noticed, ever since around 2024, a bit before the election, they started joking about JD Pondon because that Trump will destroy the America world order by undermining all the trade, undoing all our diplomatic pacts. And honestly, I think that was a decent enough prediction. It wasn't even out of hate for him anymore. They were excited for it.
I mean, I'm excited for it too, just because, you know my philosophy. I'm all blood alone moves the wheels of history. We need the chaos.
True Hegelians here.
Arjun Palmer wants up. I'm gonna go ahead and let him up here real quick. How you doing, Arjun Palmer?
Yeah, it's kind of insane to me that all the stuff that we were told would happen and Trump won is happening now.
It is a little funny. It almost seems like a bad joke, but
Yeah.
it'd be hilarious if it weren't so sad.
We all know
that
in my
everyone's
personal
embracing the
opinion,
memes
it's
now.
probably because after the whole January 6th incident, I think Trump and the Bush era Republicans just stopped working with each other. And somehow Trump managed to keep the party united under his platform.
I have a sick twisted theory that all of this is not Trump's ironic beliefs, but this is actually his weird vengeance for losing 2020. If he can't have the US, and he's just gonna try and burn it down.
No, I think the tariffs are a part of his genuine belief because his whole thing is using the tariffs to build leverage on these other countries to renegotiate the usage of the United States dollar. And he also kind of does want to deflate currency.
Right. But I do have some problems with his whole tariff policy and his spiel, primarily that he's missing the point that tariffs aren't gonna magically just bring back jobs overnight. He needs a good set of subsidies too, and I think that was something that Biden did well. We need Biden's subsidy with Trump's tariffs, and we need more moderate tariffs, but
yeah, the whole issue is Trump tries to do laissez-faire capitalism while using tariffs at the same time, where it's oh yeah, they'll just move over here organically.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
You're just giving them an excuse to charge more, even on top of the tariffs, and they can just say, "Hey, yeah, this is the tariff fee." No, they're gonna love this.
The other thing that annoyed the hell out of me is that he then started using the tariffs to justify other tax cuts, and I'm like, why are we cutting taxes when we're trying to cut our deficit? Don't we need to be generating more income?
Well, that's also just his whole anti-big government, because big government means more government control over the corporations and everything. And again, leaning back into what George said about the laissez-faire stance.
Oh, I just wish their stances were logically consistent. That's it.
Well,
agree.
populism.
That is the big thing I've come to realize about American politics is that we as Americans want our cake and want to eat it too, but we can't. we want lower taxes, but we also want to get rid of our debt and our deficit. We got to pay off the deficit somehow. That means we're going to need high taxes. We want socialized healthcare, but we don't want to deal with all the things we need to have in order to have socialized healthcare, like higher taxes on unhealthy foods or all that jazz. And it's like we got to have these things that the rest of the civilized world has in order to have these good things, but no, Americans don't. They just want to take. They don't want to give.
The American population is not well educated. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, 50 years old or 5 years old. We're just not well educated people. And therefore,
Yeah.
that's why we've seen the rise in populism in both the right and the left, is that people just want everything and don't want to think about any of the consequences.
There's something to also be said. Oh, sorry.
We're a very selfish and spoiled race.
Like, this isn't just unique, I think, to America. There's it's also why we see populism elsewhere, especially in Europe, coming into like vogue. A lot of it is that, like, I think postmodern capitalism really wants us to be good consumers where we don't think about giving at all. Like, this is something I've been stewing on because I read Byung-Chul Han's Burnout Society, and he gets into this where we just kind of live for hyperactivity and to consume now, and we're ideated just towards like being that ideal consumer.
I would disagree with like comparing all situations with the Europeans. The Europeans, though rising populism, are based off much different circumstances. I mean, the right-wing populism in Europe is very much based off of the reaction to the mass migrations of peoples from the Middle East and Africa.
In my opinion, still populism is something of the id. It's something of consumption. It doesn't really matter its like specific political context where it comes up. It's still something that existed because like that might be the initiating reason why, but it always grows into being, oh, I want more stuff. I can use this as an other to justify me wanting more stuff.
Yeah, and we can trace the whole issue of illegal immigration and mass immigration back to consumerism, because at the fundamental core of mass immigration, it's about supplying the cheap labor to keep prices down.
And also, when it comes down to the European mass migration, like, imperialism did kind of play a role in there with the, which imperialism and, well, specifically neocolonialism plays a role in, like, getting us cheaper consumer goods or cheaper resources to make consumer goods. Like how we had American oil companies move in on Iraq, which destabilized most of the Middle East.
I don't know. I'm not completely convinced on the argument that you can compare like the two sides of the Atlantic in a similar vein. I mean, if you're gonna use consumerism, then it's like that. It's like saying capitalism, which is like the U.S. dollar is the reason why everything's a problem today. It just becomes meaningless.
Okay, one thing I was about to actually kind of start arguing that direction, because I'm looking at this from a psychoanalytical point, like Zizek, Byung-Chul Han, and a couple others all jump from like that more Freudian and Lacanian perspective, where capitalist ideology as a guiding factor, capitalist liberal Republican ideology, ideates people to be consumers and individualistic. It doesn't really matter what country you're in. That's still something that is encouraged. And also, America exports its culture and consumer identity as well.
I'm going to be completely honest, and I think you've known this for a while. I mean, I am not that into various philosophies. I can tell you I based my knowledge off of what is and what was, not what kind of is, should be, if that makes any sense. So my reaction is that with the Europeans, at least, it's that this is all reaction to like the conflict at the end of the day. There's just deeper in the cultural role, which is more so they're losing the sense of what they are. Because it's not just the mass migrations, but it's also like the idea of unifying all of the European nations into one peoples, which is so like ahistorical, and it's caused an identity crisis within them, all of them. From the Swedish, the Poles, to the Italians, to what have you. Well, as America, we've always had that consumerism in part of our cult and that individualism, and these are also like alien to the European historical identity, which is another external pressures on them.
Okay, actually, something when you were talking about with like the crisis of identity and with the culture war, Byung Chul Ho also Han actually gets into that as well with Burnout Society, talking about the violence of positivity, where there is like no definitive other. There's things that we know are foreign to us, but not a complete definite other to base ourselves in reaction to anymore. And that's broken down where everything is supposed to be viewed as kind of samey yet individual. There's only foreignness, not he puts in like immunological terms, and the only way to describe it is like the modern like social order has an autoimmune disease where we can't define an other. Like tariffs, actually, getting back to the original topic, is a way of just lashing out the world to try to find another, since the United States hasn't had one since like the Fukuyamist end of history with the end of the Soviet Union, where we don't have an ideological enemy anymore.
Okay. Again, I just don't know these names. Like, I know my thoughts are not original, but I have no clue who's said them before me and made them popular.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine. I'm just like I just read this guy not too long ago and fully digested him, so I'm excited to talk about him if that makes sense.
Gotcha. It's your hyperfixation.
Yeah, I have one book syndrome. Read the last thing I read, it becomes my entire personality for the next couple months.
Oh, it's so
well,
true, brother.
well, there's at least one upside we could possibly find from the tariffs. They're really hurting them billionaires. At least I hope they are.
I don't think so.
Not
I've
really.
also heard the possibility that it might be a pump and dump scheme that Trump created. All these tariffs.
Like there's that
Oh,
angle possibly, but like there's this good video I watched that was trying to do an analysis of Besant's paper that he wrote before, like I think around 2020, about how to do a tariff plan and how to implement it to get the US dollar back on like a place where the United States can both have industrial output and still be the world reserve currency. So like I don't think it's as like corrupt as people try to make it out to be, but actual conviction around tariffs as policy. It's bad, but like I think they actually believe. I'm not gonna just like hand wave it with Trump doing pump and dumps for billionaires.
So they believe it. They're just stupid.
Yeah, it's like a very risky gamble of trying to build leverage that way. When like the United States became the world reserve currency originally, that was through consensus and through
Right.
people wanting to get on the dollar because the United States was such like so good at industrial output at the time, because it was like around 1950s to 1970s, and that's when our industrial output started to decline, and it was like finally fate was sealed with Reagan. I
yeah,
don't
you're talking
remember
about
the
the
exact
Bretton
word.
Woods system, aren't you?
Yeah, Bretton Woods system and like the other conference that happened under Reagan a bit later that ushered in the more neoliberal age with free trade.
Damn you, Reagan. What was I gonna say? I had a thought on the top of my head. Dang it, I forgot what I was gonna say.
We gotta stop writing notes down on the side.
Hmm.
I've noticed that myself personally when I'm in conversations. I just gotta write like a word or two down on like a piece of paper on my arm or something to come back to it later in the conversation.
Well, it doesn't help that my head's currently blown up like a balloon. That does not
Hmm.
help at all. Anywho, I also heard a rather interesting fact that apparently, since Doge was implemented, the U.S. government actually might be losing money. Not
How
saving,
so?
losing money. Apparently, the theory goes that one, it has to do with retraining staff, and that costs the government a lot of money. And the second reason is believed to be because Elon and Doge and all those people unintentionally actually shut down or liquidated organizations or entities within the government that actually grossed money.
Oh yeah, like I know some of the studies like that the U.S. government does that seem kind of stupid end up making big money when the research is sold to private capital.
And
Oh,
half of
sorry.
those studies and who knows what, especially those things in third world countries, are probably just CIA slush funds, which help with other things.
If CIA was doing something like that, I don't think they would do it under like studies. Like that's way too obvious if you're like a U.S. like agent spying.
Right, but I remember making the comment on Twitter a while back. I said, do you really think the US government is handing out condoms to some third world peasants? No. That's some CIA agent slush fund.
No, I think the U.S. government definitely would do that. I'm thinking about the Dalcon shield again.
What's the Delcon shield?
Basically 1970s people who were like basically deep ecologists, some of them in the US government, some outside, distributed faulty IUDs throughout sub-Saharan Africa in a attempt to do population control.
What the hell? That's
And
messed
the
up.
IUDs were not sterilized in their packaging, and they had a known issue with them that would cause them to tear on the way out. So it would cause infections and then sepsis.
Ugh. That's very messed up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's this whole thing goes to show just how big our government is. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong that we have like, U.S. agencies helping with like Ebola or like awful like just like lack of food in the middle of the Congo or what have you. But I think it's a testament to just how massive and how our government is. I know that's not a new thought, but it's just it concerns me just like how much all government takes on. Again, I think we've all agreed. The fact that we still have like millions of homeless people here in our own streets, and then we're also spending millions of dollars on like to help poor people in other countries too. It's just the whole thing's illogical.
Now, my biggest concern is that when the Republicans lose, because let's face it, they are going to lose after this dumpster fire. There's going to be a massive blue wave come midterm. What I'm worried is after Trump spending all his time and effort basically tearing down the status quo, that the Democrats are just going to try and rebuild it. Like I've already seen the progressive posters, the Democrat simps and everything going on about it's like we're not going to get universal health care when we take back over. We're going to have to rebuild everything Trump destroyed. I'm saying, why rebuild it? I mean,
Because
why?
Another New Deal.
Wait a minute. Wait, what else are they supposed to say? Instead of what's the the Democrats? I've always had a problem with them because of how like almost reactionary they are in to a detriment to themselves or what have you. But it's like what are they gonna base the whole like campaign on then? If it's not the opposite of Trump, if they're just gonna keep what he does, then why would anyone vote for them as opposed to Trump and the Republicans?
Well, what I'm not saying keep what he does. I'm just saying don't rebuild the status quo. Trump is burning everything down. This is the perfect opportunity to rebuild everything from scratch.
Yeah, they won't do it.
Nero built public housing after Rome burned.
Like I'm saying, let's Trump tear down democracy. Not democracy. Well, yeah. Never mind. I'm thinking that actually helps us. So yes, we could allow that. We can allow a little tyranny. But anyway, let Trump tear down the bureaucracy. Let Trump tear down the economy, the international economic order. Let Trump help incentivize manufacturing to return. And then once he's done burning all the shit to the ground, you have the perfect foundation for the New Deal that you always wanted because he took away all the red tape. It is.
They're not that smart. The Democrats are not that smart.
I know they're
I
not
believe in
that
Tim
smart.
Walz. I believe in the Tim Walz regime. If they run Kamala again, I think like it's just over for the Democrats as a party organization. But if they run Tim Walz and let him off the leash, I think they can do some shit.
I know they're not that smart. But a guy can dream. I can cope, can't I?
It's like all the left is saying, oh, you needed a Hoover before you got an FDR. You needed a Hoover before you got an FDR.
And we know for a fact, however, that the Democrats aren't smart enough to give us FDR. What are
Not
they
to
going to
mention,
give
there's
us?
like just no FDR. Period. All the smart people like that are out of politics. They know that like the political game is just ain't it anymore.
You know, I came to a revelation about the natures of the two parties when it comes for how they do politics. And I want y'all to hear me out for a moment. The Republican Party treats politics like they're a used car dealership. It's all about the sales pitch. It doesn't matter if it's a good idea, if they're a good person or a decent politician. They're just looking for someone charismatic enough to sell the party, to sell the sales pitch, and that's why they keep defaulting to Trump. Because even though he's an idiot, he has a charisma to him. Now the Democrats, on the other hand, they have a strategy. I mean, they vet their candidates, they pick them, they basically ignore their primaries and the will of their party, the will of their supporters, to pick a candidate that they think is competent. The problem is that the Democratic Party is a bunch of idiots. Like, they have a strategy. It's a stupid-ass strategy, but there is a strategy.
Maybe the parties break. Both of them break, and we get new ideologies and new factions.
Please, Lord, give that to me. Please. But, what I think ended the Democratic Party is that they were unable to pivot from social issues to economic issues after gay marriage was legalized. Because before gay marriage was legalized, the Democratic Party was the party of social progress as much as it was the party of economic progress. And, the legalization of gay marriage for the longest time was one of the big talking points. When the Supreme Court, God bless them, unpopular opinion, I love the idea of legislating from the bench. Because if it weren't for that, then nothing would get done. But anywho, back to my thought. When the Supreme Court did that, the Democrats were in a crossroads. They could pick us. They said, we could continue to go deeper and deeper and try and figure out a new social issue to rally behind. Or we could pivot to economic ideas. Bernie Sanders is ready. He seems to be a good candidate. He's well liked, well received. I think what ended up making that decision for everyone is that they picked Clinton over Sanders. That was their sign that they were going to go with a woman candidate and make the 2016 election about empowering women instead of picking the economic candidate that appealed to the working class. And that's what screwed them. Because after gay marriage became legal, they opened the Pandora's box of the gender non-binary. And it was all downhill from there, because at that point, it was a slippery slope of increasingly eccentric weirdos just dragging him further and further in. And they could not backtrack without sacrificing their rallying point, their market pitch.
Okay, I can agree with the false, maybe half to 2/3 of your analysis. I definitely agree with the past decade, them dying on the social progress hill has been what screws them over, because that's where you saw just the gradual loss of support from the average American worker, because it wasn't about trying to better one's income, being able to buy a house or car. It was talking about just all of this social stuff that it really is more detrimental now, because now the idea of diversity at all is just totally screwed. So therefore, it's not just you're reacting because you hate transgender people, but now it's opens the gateway. I hate any person of this race or whatever. So it's I can just be an open racist.
One thing I want to say is that the Democrats were never really a party of the working class to begin with. They were always at least middle class to upper middle class.
But that's both parties though.
Well, yeah, but the Republicans always had a more workerist and rural bent, even if they didn't always show it with unions. The Democrats stopped being the party of the worker by the Clinton administration, and that was even before they really took up most of the LGBT issues.
I would say before then maybe they were still the party of the worker. I don't know. It's strange because you have that phase between the 50s and the 70s where you have the labor unions and the mafia and everything, and everyone buying into both sides. Really muddy in the waters, but that's a really different conversation.
Maybe ALBJ is the demarcation point with the failure of Great Society.
For the record, I have to say, I'm not saying the Republicans are innocent on dragging out the social issue bandwagon either, because it was a Republican that ultimately started the bathroom debate. And in fact, I think it was Nikki Haley. I'm pretty sure it was Nikki Haley when she was serving in the State House of North Carolina. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Nikki Haley. But when they made that bill, the Republicans opened that can of worms, and it was for no reason but they wanted something to get mad at. Because the Supreme Court gave them the middle finger about gay marriage.
Well, again, that's just politics and how the nature of our system is that just try and create some hill to die on, and then direct all the attention over there so you can worry on other stuff with less eyes on you.
The greatest problem with American politics, especially contemporary American politics, is it's so dependent on outrage farming.
Because we have no enemy after the Soviets. I think you and George were talking about that earlier. Without the Soviets as our complete opposite from which we can we can have some kind of toxic relationship with. It's the same thing with the Roman Republic. We have no enemy but within.
Well, I would argue that goes back further. Like, we could talk about how the Confederacy was basically just the rich white slave owners outrage farming on the northern states encroaching on the self-governing practices of the southern states.
Well, no, that's still like economic in base compared to culture war, which is completely social. Like Fukuyama predicted, like, oh, America will no longer have an enemy, and they will eventually just tear themselves down out of spite.
Which we are.
Yeah, because this is all spite at like basically being mad at the like elements of America that we also take for granted, like the consumerism and individualism.
Now, what did Fukuyama say about what happens after all this happens?
I think he just kind of viewed that as the apocalypse, man. Like he's gotten way depressed in his more recent writings.
Well, yeah. I wonder why.
Like he's the liberal guy. He doesn't know what comes after liberalism because he thought liberalism won.
because he invested in the religion of liberalism.
Do not stop. If the wheels of history stop, it's because we are dead, and we are not dead.
But that was his goal. That was the promise of the god of liberalism.
Well, it's like it's more just generally positivism, where it's like, oh, history progresses forward. I was reading Blanqui earlier today, which very interesting read. I don't know why leftists have beef with him in the same, like, we should have beef with him. He was like a staunch Republican and Jacobin, but his critique of positivism was just like, why are you assuming that things just go forward and just get better? Like, what?
The thing I always tell people when it comes to positivism and progress is that the first rule of the laws of physics is that moving forward is subjective. It is relative to where you are. An object always moves forward, no matter where. Sorry. An object always moves forward from the perspective of the object. Just because you don't think it's moving forward from where it stands does not mean it's moving forward.
Again, this is just part of like the religion of liberalism and progress. Is that it's essentially it's this inevitable march of glorious evolution, and if there's any sort of deviation, it's anathema and heretical.
I do love butchering me some sacred cows, though. Let's keep it up.
I wanted to say this earlier, and I completely forgot to, but it's like Biden kind of screwed over the Democrats in both 2016 and 2024. Especially when you were talking about earlier with the gay marriage and all that, is that Clinton was not the choice. Biden was the choice, and because he was so depressed about his dead son, the Democrats kind of had to like come to a consensus on his replacement, who happened to be Clinton. And then she bought into a whole like I'm a woman thing, and started that march towards like this obsession of social progress. But like Bernie Sanders was not going to be the pick in 2016. He wasn't going to be the pick in 2020 or 2024 because he has this like label as the communist with him. He's always had this label, and he'll always be denounced by the majority as a communist, as a Russian spy. Hello?
We're still here.
Yeah, I'm just processing all you put down.
Oh, sorry. That
no, you just hit me with like a truc.
But I've thought about this, and I've said this to friends, and actually, I think I've truth bombed them with this too. It's just like, though, even if whether you agree with him or not, I'm not gonna give my views on Sanders. I'm gonna give the majority popular public perspective on him is that he is a communist. He might not be an actual communist, but he is still labeled and seen by most people as a communist, and that's so it's like electing a the Antichrist as president or something in this country. It's not going to happen.
Imagine all the really shitty edits that used to be out there by leftists of like Biden as like a chairman, like Mao-esque figure.
Imagine all the shitty edits today with Trump as a chairman Maoist.
Oh yeah, well no, that's like ongoing. JD Pondon is in vogue, and I love every single slammer edit. It's way better than the K, or how do you pronounce the 3 Ks in like Maoist standard English? But like 3K Kamala, and they would always have her like in a Nazi uniform.
I thought you would. Okay, yeah.
Maoists aren't something else, man.
I'm not that far down the rabbit hole.
That's They're all fucked I can in say. The head. Like, I love them because they make the most fuck shit out there, but they're wrong in the head.
Wow, that's so many people, though. That's so many Americans in the politics.
That's true. We live in a neurotic time.
Because there's no truth.
That's the question. How do we get out?
I don't know. We would like move on beyond postmodernism.
Monarchy.
Well, yeah, that's true too. But like, also get rid of postmodernism. That's my beef.
How do you get rid of postmodernism?
You move on to the next thing. You get some definitive meaning. Like you start having grand narratives again. I don't know.
Okay. No, you're right. Okay, so that walks into my answer too. It's monarchy. And this is my view of it. It's more nuanced or whatever from like the most of all views. Is that I don't give a I don't really care that much about like how do I say this? The objective actual truth, but more so what you can make out of it. I'm very Hobbesian in that respect. And there's someone else, a philosopher I know that I can't remember the name of, but what am I trying to buy into is that you need some kind of truth, you need a moral compass, and whether that's in Christianity or neo-paganism or what have you, we need it. We need it, and we need to institutionalize it and force people to adopt it.
I think we're gonna start seeing a rebirth in existentialism. I think we're gonna see like a Nietzschean renaissance.
Well, we are kind of in the Nietzschean era. Like, we're in the time of the last men. Well, no, we haven't really been in a Nietzschean era because no one wants to really like. In the modernist period, we were more repressed. There was nothing to overcome to have the will to power like against. Now everyone is supposed to be their own like individual and their own Ubermensch, and that's only been in the postmodern epoch. And but we've all kind of failed to do it, so we end up as like consuming last men, where we just live to consume more content slop, and to become that. I'm sorry.
I like to believe that I am on the path of being the Ubermensch. I really do. I like to believe that I'm trying my best to go through that path of self-struggle and self-determination too.
Well, sometimes it's just okay to choose slave morality. As long as you're not a last man, then you're good. But we live in the time of the last men.
You see, my whole thought on slave morality and the whole thing is that I think I've mentioned this before on an older episode, is what I think Nietzsche misses a point in, particularly with the way he addresses religion and Christianity, is that he misses a point about how Christianity involves a lot of the same basic goals as Ubermensch. It's just different. It's about mankind overcoming itself. It's just, instead of mankind coming over its nihilistic, materialistic values to basically become their own god, it's mankind overcoming its nihilistic, materialistic desires to become more like a god. And it's all about transcending the human condition. It's still both about transcending a narrow-minded human condition.
I think I disagree with your interpretation of the Nietzschean Ubermensch there. because it's about choosing your own moral code, where it's like Christianity is not slave morality because of its own moral prescriptions, but because you are subjecting yourself to another moral system. Nietzsche analyzes that moral system and critiques it from his own perspective, especially factoring in his belief around the death of God, but he doesn't explicitly say that this is a negative thing to choose. You can choose which path to go on as long as you choose.
Well, if that is the case, then what is to stop me from choosing the Christian path? Why does that make it slave morality then? If I choose to follow that path, why is it still slave morality? If I choose to make that my moral code.
It's because
you didn't make it yourself.
Yeah, basically. You don't define it through your own self-discovery. You might discover that you agree with this, but it's an other that you are looking towards to base yourself on in reaction to, compared to it coming from within.
Fair enough, but I still argue that the idea and notion of just because eventually there is not going to be a complete, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no such thing as a complete and total individuality. There's always going to be overlap. So my thought process on this is if a human being chooses to dedicate themselves, that's good enough because they at least still made that choice to dedicate themselves to that path and choose that for themselves.
Well, yeah, there's no moral prescription. Nietzsche says it's bad that you chose this for yourself. It's just, this is my thoughts on it. I put it into these two categories. I think this one's the better one. I don't like this one that much, but also make your own damn decision. It's why thus spoke Zarathustra, Zoroaster abandons his disciples to go on their own path.
Fundamentally, though, I do think monks are some of the closest things we'll ever get to and supposed at least thought process or idea of Ubermen just because of how above the human condition they are. But that's just me.
You're making me think of Nietzsche's rant against monks and genealogy of morals. He was pissed off at their existence.
I mean, there's a reason why
he's mad that they can do what he cannot, sever themselves from all material things.
Well, factoring in his life, he kind of was, though. He was kind of just a hermit and a monk. It might have been self-hate there.
Right. I mean, I do agree with that. I kind of enjoy the whole self-isolation sometimes, too. That I do partake in, and I enjoy greatly. Anywho, I think we should probably start wrapping up.
Yeah, we went on a tangent about Nietzsche. We're in the weeds.
Yes.
I feel like Nietzsche is always brought up. If not every episode, then every other episode.
Okay, I am a Nietzschean guy, though.
Yeah.
I need to sit down and actually read Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I know it's a long, long book, but I need to sit down and actually read it. But I do like Nietzsche.
Just approach it like you would the Bible. That's the only way I can really give as advice to reading it, because it is just formatted in that way. And if that doesn't work out, just read Beyond Good and Evil. It explained a bit more plainly and not in such aloof terms.
So, to compare it to, say, communism, Beyond Good and Evil is a Communist Manifesto, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra is Das Kapital.
No, I wouldn't say that. This is if Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged and then wrote a book after that explaining what Atlas Shrugged meant. Where it's not one's more complex, it's just very flowery and a little indirect because it's written kind of like an ancient epic.
And isn't the moral of the story behind Atlas Shrugged is that when we start treating everything as extraordinary, everything becomes ordinary?
I don't know. I don't respect Ayn Rand.
I know the ideas and values behind Atlas Shrugged were a big influence behind the Incredibles movies by Pixar.
That makes some sense. They also have the styling that's associated with Rand with the Art Deco sort of look with it.
Right,
this is a crazy analysis.
The premise of Atlas Shrugged is the idea is that when we start treating everyone as extraordinary and unique, any source of or form of genuine specialness, of genuine uniqueness, becomes lost. And it's this notion that you have to recognize those that go above and beyond. You have to recognize the extraordinary, or the extraordinary ceases to exist.
Yeah, I just like that.
Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, like I've only really read and like interacted with the Fountainhead, and I kind of just view that as like smut because it basically is smut with like a political message inserted inside of it, which is blow up public housing if it's not built to your specifications when you're the architect. I don't like that like vulgar individualism. I don't know.
All right, let's wrap up here. We now went from a tangent on Nietzsche to a tangent on Ayn Rand. All right, thank you for joining us this evening on Monarchist Minute. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like the content, like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube, or follow us if you're listening to this on another streaming service. We will not have an episode next week because it'll be Easter weekend. Go be with your families, go be with God. Christ will rise from the dead come next Sunday. Until then, please join us in prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Heavenly Father, keep us safe, and help us to have a blessed and observant Holy Week. May we convene again once we are done honoring you and your Son. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for joining us this evening. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you, and good night.